Hello, colleagues, and welcome to the Assistant Principal Podcast. This version of 5 for Friday recaps the daily emails from August 29th through September 2nd. If you don't already get the daily emails, then you can find a subscription link at frederickbuskey.com. If you already get those emails, then I hope that this will add some value for you. Before we continue, we have a lot of new subscribers, so I just want to outline how I think you can get the most out of the daily email. The most important thing is actually to not put pressure on yourself to read it. It's easy to get behind and then to start to feel pressure and judge yourself for not reading the email every day, and that creates negative emotions that you don't need. So if you miss a day, don't worry about it. It's fine. If you have only a short window, 30 seconds, just scan the MVP and you can get the gist of the email for your day, and then at least maybe be able to set some kind of intention. I think the ideal way to use the email is to look at it first thing in the morning. So when you first open your email for the day, if you go to that email and try to give yourself 5 minutes, and so there are 3 steps to that. One, of course, read it. The second thing then is to spend a minute just reflecting on what the message is and how it applies to you. And then third, and I think most importantly, is actually to set an intention for that day and think about, okay, what's the message that came out of this? And how can I apply that message today to help somebody and to grow my own leadership? I try to write the email so that every day there is something that you can take away that you can be really intentional with. And if you want to add a bonus, you can reply to an email. If something really resonates with you, you can just hit the reply button and share with me, share the story, share what was critical and why you reacted to it. And if something really rubbed you the wrong way, let me know. And if you have an idea for improving the daily email, let me know, right? This thing doesn't get better if I don't hear from people. So I'd love to hear from you if you have the time to reply, but again, no pressure. Before we jump into the recap, I want to tell you the story that actually drove all of these emails. So I met with a friend and a daily email reader, and she shared how she'd been working on her leadership, reading the daily email, trying to apply things, reading books, listening to other podcasts, and just was not getting anywhere. She was working in an organization that had very poor leadership at the top. There was no encouragement to grow. There was no engagement. There were no relationships, a lot of apathy. And what she realized after a while was that she was starting to lose her edge, and she was starting to lose interest in growing and becoming better. And in a way, she was starting to check out. So she did something really wise and I think courageous to a certain extent, and that was to leave the organization and go somewhere else where they are nurturing her growth and she can continue to work her leadership, make a difference with other people, but also have leaders who are supporting her growth. So having that story in mind really drove this week's emails. The message on Monday was that good leadership matters and your leadership matters. But what does good leadership look like? I addressed that in terms of the framework called the 6 dimensions of organizations. The first and most important dimension of an organization is purpose, and good leaders are purpose-driven. The second dimension is structures. Structures consist of both the physical assets of the organization, but also the rules, the policies, and the customs that we use. And so good leaders make sure that those structures and those rules actually make it easier for people to fulfill the purpose. The third dimension is resources, and good leaders make sure that resources are allocated to priority projects that are focused on achieving the organizational purpose. The fourth dimension, and really the second most important dimension of organizations, is people. And good leaders make sure that they are supporting people and helping people grow and develop skills that fulfill the purpose of the organization. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern here. The fifth dimension of organizations is internal forces. And we can really think about internal forces as being culture, and culture is heavily influenced by the alignment of the people, the structures, and the resources with the purpose. Finally, there's external forces. Example of that recently is COVID. Something that we didn't control in organizations, came from the outside and impacted us. The role of leadership in dealing with external forces is that leaders can either dampen the negative effects or heighten the positive effects of the external forces that are coming to influence our organizations. So again, the recap of Monday: leadership matters and your leadership matters. On Tuesday, I wrote about supporting new teachers in schools. New teachers need three things. They need help with classroom management. They need support with curriculum and how to focus on the curriculum to teach it. And third, and most important, they need positive relationships with school leaders. Of those three things, if you can only focus on one thing with your new teachers, focus on building relationships. On Wednesday, I quoted Mary Hemphill, the North Carolina Department of Education Chief Academic Officer. And she said back in episode 26, when we did an interview with her, that when a good person is in a bad system, the system will always win. It's only one amazing quote from a great interview, so I would really encourage you to go back and listen or even re-listen to episode 26 with Mary Hemphill. So what if you're in a bad system? Really, you have three options. You can leave, you can apply for the top job, or you can try to insulate your unit from the negative impacts of the greater system. On Thursday, we went from the complex that we've been dealing with all week to something really simple, which is if you have to distill leadership into two things, it comes down to this: purpose and relationships. Leadership is hard, but it's really not that complicated. If you focus on the purpose and you build relationships, the rest of the things will come. Not easy, but simple. On Friday, I just asked three questions, three things that I wanted you to reflect on throughout the day and maybe the weekend. So they're these. If you strip everything away, what are the essential elements of your leadership? And do you have a concrete strategy or plan for improving any of those elements this year? And finally, do you have a plan or at least an intention of supporting other people in your organization and growing some of those leadership elements? So, what's the big takeaway from the week? First is that leadership matters, and it matters at every level of the organization. The second thing is that leadership is really hard. But the third thing, and I hope you know where we're going, is that it is simple. And the two things for you to focus on that I hope you focus on as you listen to this podcast and take into next week. Focus on your purpose. Focus on the organizational purpose and what you're trying to achieve. And focus on building those relationships. And speaking of relationships, next week on the daily emails, we will focus on building relationships. And each day we'll look at one different aspect of what it means, because it's easy to say build relationships. What does that actually look like? Stay tuned next week. Okay, that wraps up today's 5 for Friday. I hope you'll join me next time on the Assistant Principal Podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, please go ahead and rate it. That will help other people to find it. If you have any questions, email me at frederick@frederickbuskey.com. And if you want to know more about what we're doing to serve assistant principals, you can find out that information at frederickbuskey.com/theassistantprincipal. Okay, that's it for this week. Have a great weekend. Cheers.